This episode of Brains on Games will preview on Circus Grounds, a detective game that's super thematic and open-ended. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald. In this episode, we are going to preview a very open-ended, super thematic detective game where you're trying to solve the murder of a circus owner. It's a game that was sent to me not long ago by the folks at Studio Stamp, and you might hear some pieces rattling around while I pick up this box, but look how old-timey and old-fashioned this box is. On Circus Grounds is a game that you can play with kids age 15 and up. You can play it with between 1 and 4 players. It does seem to help to have at least one other person with you, and I'll talk about that. And games can take 2 to 4 hours, depending on how efficient you are at figuring out these clues. Let's take a deeper look at On Circus Grounds. Like I said, this is a detective game where you're trying to solve a mystery, so it's going to be a little bit tough for me to talk very much about it in very much detail because I don't want to spoil anything. So I'm going to avoid spoilers as much as possible. You may hear some very mild spoilers as we go through some of the components and the activities that you'll be doing in this game. This is a medium to heavy deduction game where you are trying to solve a mystery. So you've got a bunch of pieces in that box that I showed you that include things like letters from the coroner about cause of death. It includes the statements that were taken by the police officer from all of the people who are at the circus, and you are solving the murder of a circus owner. So when I said it's open-ended, it is exactly that. I opened up this box and there's a ton of stuff inside, not just notes and pages like this, all kinds of props. And there's a little note that provides you maybe with a bit of advice on how to approach this problem. But unlike other escape room games and detective style games that I've played, those ones tend to you start in a room where you start with the situation and you solve each situation to go on to the next one. And it's very much on rails. On Circus Grounds is one where you just have all of the pieces all at once in front of you and you have to figure out what to do with them. The one thing that was recommended in the envelope that I read and on the website, so there is a website that's associated with this game that will allow you to get some hints if you need them. But on both the website and the little note that came inside the box of the game, one of the suggestions is to create some sort of a timeline. So you're going to be taking notes about the clues and you really are doing some detective work to figure out who murdered this circus owner. So this is a very old-timey circus from 1883. And like I said, it's very thematic. You can see these they look like handwritten notes from the statements that the officer gathered. There are newspaper ads about the circus. There's a poster of the circus, an advertisement. There are these fantastic photographs inside of the suspects and the circus employees, and you can see a few of those. There are things written on the back that I'm not going to show you. They might be a bit reflective too, because those are glossy, thick cardboard photographs, which I thought were pretty neat when I opened everything up. It's a game where, again, like most of the escape room games and detective style games I've played, you're reading text from a booklet or you're reading text from cards. Every once in a while, there might be something on a website to look at or listen to. But this one has hints on a website, but all of the components and clues are in the box. And it's not just text. There are props like those photographs, like these tarot cards. You know, of course, there's going to be a fortune teller at a circus in the 1800s. There are all kinds of little fancy elements to this game that make it very thematic and that really do give you the feeling that you're looking at all of these clues that have been gathered on a very, very much a cold case at this point, since it takes place in 1883. You've got all of the clues that will allow you to solve the mystery, but how you do that is up to you. It is very open-ended. Now, there's lots of reading because there are lots of police statements. What are the other things that you're going to do to solve this mystery? There are puzzles for you to figure out. There's code breaking to be done. There are little things that you'll have to do with the props that I will not tell you very much about. And props even include, of course, somebody at the circus has some sort of a locket that provides a clue for what you're going to be doing here in this game. So you've got physical objects that you're interacting with, and you've got all of this information from the police investigation, but it's really up to you how you tackle it. Now, there are some clues that require you to have figured out previous clues in order to really move forward. So the puzzles are kind of interact with one another a little bit. Sometimes you might need to do things in a certain way, but it's all up to the players of the game. Now, I said at the beginning, it is for 1 to 4 players. I did this all by myself. It is a 2 to 4 hour game, and my kids were working or busy with school, so I wasn't able to have anybody in to help me out with this. It would have been helpful to have a second person because some of the puzzles and codes that you have to break, well, it would have been nice to have somebody call out some information so that the other person could write it down instead of trying to go back and forth between the clue and your notes page. And you are going to need to take at least a few notes. I like that suggestion of creating a timeline of where everybody was and what they were doing, because there's a lot of clues and a lot of information. And then once you get into the coded stuff, oh my gosh. So it really is a very puzzly detective style game. And like I said, you're on your own in terms of how you approach it, which I kind of liked, not being on a rail in this case. That, though, is my question for this episode. If you are playing one of these puzzly style games where you're trying to solve a mystery or escape from some situation, do you prefer lots of guidance, or do you like the idea of a very open-ended game where you can approach it from whatever angle in whatever way you want? You can answer that question in the comment section below the video. I'd love to hear what you think about more guidance versus more open-ended. But what skills are you working on when you're doing a detective style game like this? Well, of course, deductive reasoning is what you're trying to do. You're deducing what happened here and who murdered the circus owner. So there is a lot of deduction. You will kind of want to create some sort of a story, and there's a story here to figure out. But even when you're looking at the statements from the different people that the police interviewed, you don't know what's true and what's not true. So you really have to put a lot of information together. So there is a lot of deductive reasoning that's required when you're playing these kinds of detective games. Some of the puzzles require spatial skills. Some of the puzzles require some verbal reasoning and some spelling tricks in terms of cracking some code. So there's all kinds of things that you're going to be doing in this game, and it's complex enough that I do think 15 and up, maybe 14-year-olds, but I think we're talking about older teenagers who are going to be trying to figure this out. Another skill, of course, when you are collecting a lot of information that you have to keep track of and organize in some way, you're going to be working on some note-taking skills. How do you organize that information? And it is so open-ended that it really is up to the players. You will need to write some things down because the codes are going to require you to do certain things. So it's like I said, I don't want to spoil anything, but note taking, I think, is important, and so you're going to need to figure out some way to organize information, but it is up to the players how they do that. Final thoughts, though, about On Circus Grounds. Well, this is a game that has a story. So it is a detective game, but there is some story to it, and the story has to be uncovered by the players as they solve the puzzles and go through the game and put all of the information together. So it probably took me more than 2 hours to figure everything out. And I was doing it over a couple of days. So I had to kind of go back and reread my notes and reorganize things and recover my train of thought. So I did it over a little bit of a longer period of time. But I think that this is the kind of thing where, right now, those true crime documentaries are such a big deal, and you're seeing people solve mysteries, and there's so many of those documentaries now that you see on the streaming services, and this gives you a chance to try out what those detectives, even if we're talking about civilian detectives, are doing in those documentaries. So it's a pretend story, but there's a lot of drama going on behind the scenes, and the physical props, the pictures in addition to the text, the photos, you're not just looking at just a flat sheet that has a picture on it. It feels like you're doing that police investigation, and it really sucks you into this 1883 circus where you're trying to figure out what happened to Nicholas Maester and who was involved in his death. Now, if there's a downside to this kind, I would say to any of these sort of escape rooms or detective kinds of games, is that these are single use games. Once you've figured out the mystery, well, I'm not going to be able to solve this again 6 months from now because I already know what happened, or I think I already know what happened. I haven't checked my answer yet, but I do think I know what happened here. So it is a single use game. It's the kind of thing where, and I think I talked about this way, way back with Star Wars Unlock. Uh, it's the kind of game where you and your friend might pick up two different escape room or detective games, and then you trade them once you're done. It is a single use thing. If you're careful, you don't have to destroy anything in the game. There are some things that you might take notes on, but in my case, I took a picture. I took a picture of those things and put it on my iPad, and I was able to make notes on the picture as opposed to destroying the original prop that was included in the game. Uh, the other thing, and really this is the only maybe downside to On Circus Grounds, if you like these kinds of I mean, let's be honest, if you like these kinds of detective games, and if you're willing to deal with the open-endedness of a game like this is perfect. Like the props are awesome. The story, I like the story. You're figuring out lots of different kinds of puzzles, so there's some variety there. It is single use, but the thing that was the downside for me was that these old-timey fonts and some of the things on some of the other props were a little hard to read. It was the font that was mixing things up for me, and I did occasionally have to double check on the Hint website, not for the hint, but just to make sure I had copied down the text properly from these notes. Because if you're trying to crack a code and you're not sure, is that an N or a U? Is that supposed to be an F or an L? Sometimes things might have been a little bit confusing for me. Now, your mileage may vary. You might look at that font and say, this is no problem. What was that guy talking about? But for me, I did have to double check sometimes to make sure that I was on the right track, just in terms of copying the information. Some of the puzzles are challenging, so you will be doing some brain work. Occasionally, you get a bit of a brain burner when it comes to some of these clues, but I won't elaborate too much on that, other than to say, to repeat, as I said earlier, if you are a fan of true crime documentaries and you're a puzzle solver, these puzzles are fun to do, and it's so thematic. It sucks you in. On Circus Grounds is probably my favorite detective game that I haven't played a lot of them, I'll be honest with you, but this is my favorite detective game because it's so open-ended. You could do whatever you want. And the props, I really liked having props as opposed to just pictures or text. That really did add an element to the theme of the game. So thanks so much to Studio Stamp for sending this game my way. I really do appreciate it. I had some fun solving these puzzles, and I will include information about their crowdfunding campaign in the show notes of this video. If you have any questions or suggestions for me, you can leave them in the comments section of the video, or you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go. The previous ones are up there already. Brains on Games is the Twitter handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.